Assalamualaikum and good day to everyone. First of all, I want to introduce my colleague we are from Group 5, consists of Dr. Hamad Hairi, me Saiful Abdullah, Mr. Ramzani Muhammad Noor, Mrs. Fariha Jamaluddin and last but not least, Miss Yahyun. Our group will present about global issues on climate change, a case study in Hindu Kush Himalayan region. Next slide please. Our presentation outline will cover introduction about Sustainable Development Goal SDG and also Sendai Disaster Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction SFDRR, climate change at glance, case study consists of background, climate change, hazards and disaster and effect. Next, we will cover about linking the SDG and SFDRR and then solution by the communities, agencies and NGOs. Lastly, the conclusion of the presentation. Next slide, please. I will start the presentation with the introduction on SFDRR and SDG. About SFDRR 2015 to 2030, there are 187 state members signed in the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction or FFDRR on 18 March 2015 at the UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction at Japan. This SFDRR is to replace the Hyogo Framework for Action 2005 to 2015. SFDRR presents some important gains for the framing of international and national policy on DRR. SFDRR have four main targets that are to understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk governance, to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilient and enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation and reconstruction. Next slide please. For SDG, head of the state and government and high representative meeting at United Nations headquarters in New York from 25 to 27 September 2015 as the organization celebrates its 17th anniversary. They have decided on a new global sustainable development goal. This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet and prosperity. It has 17 sustainable development goals and 169 targets which demonstrate the scale and ambition of new universal agenda. Next slide, please. This is chart of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015 to 2030, consists of scope and purpose, expected outcome, goal, targets, and also its priority for action. Next slide, please. This poster was taken from the Geological Society showing that SDG plan for action for people, planet and prosperity. 17 target for SDG are number 1 is no poverty, number 2 zero hunger, number 3 good health and well-being, number 4 quality education, number 5 gender equality, number 6 clean water and sanitation, number 7 affordable and clean energy, number 8 decent work and economic growth, number 9 industry innovation and infrastructure, number 10 reduce inequalities, number 11 sustainable cities and communities, number 12 responsible consumption and production, number 13 climate action, 14 is life below water, 15 life on land, 16 peace, justice and strong institution, number 17 partnership for the goals. Next, I will pass to Fariha to continue a presentation. Pass to you, Fariha.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saiful. One of the global issues that are very critical and need our attention now is the climate change. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, defines climate change as a significant change in global temperature, precipitation, wind patterns, and other measures of climate that occur over several decades or longer. Global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment. The effects that scientists had predicted in the past are now occurring. The melting sea ice, accelerated sea level rise, and more intense heat waves. As you can see, the line plot shows yearly temperature anomalies from 1880 to 2019 as recorded by NASA, NOAA, and few other agencies. Even though there are minor variations from year to year, all the analyses show peaks and valleys are synchronized with each other. All show rapid warming in the past few decades, and all show the last decade as the warmest. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC), which includes more than 1,300 scientists from the United States and other countries, forecasts a temperature rise of 2.5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit over the next century. The range of published evidence indicates that the net damage caused of climate change are likely to be significant and to increase over time. According to the IPCC, the extent of climate change effects on individual regions will vary over time, with the ability of different societal and environmental systems to mitigate or adapt to change. Next slide, please. Climate change and environmental degradation are among the greatest challenges facing by humanity. It affecting the global economy and already shaking up social, health, and geopolitical balances in many parts of the world. The shortage of resources like food and energy, breaking out new conflicts. Rising temperatures are causing a number of impacts, including a rise in sea levels, increased frequency of droughts, floods, and other disruptive events, including bushfires and potential of haze. These effects are expected to become greater over time without urgent action at a global, national, and local level. People living in the poorest countries contributed little to these problems, but are disproportionately affected by the negative consequences. Among them, children, women, and people with disabilities are the most vulnerable and the least equipped to adapt to a changing climate. Thus, this issue will be further discussed through selected case study by the next presenter. Over to you, Dr. Khairi.
Thank you, Ms. Fariha. Now I'm going to talk about our case study, which is the Hindu Kush Himalaya area. The Hindu Kush Himalaya is an area extending over 3,500 kilometers past 8 countries, from Afghanistan in the west to Myanmar in the east and crossing Pakistan, India, China, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. The Hindu Kush Himalaya is one of the world's greatest mountain systems, encompasses about 4.2 million kilometers square area. Nearly 1.9 billion people living in the 10 river basins also benefit directly and indirectly from its resources originated from the Hindu Kush Himalaya, while more than 3 billion people enjoy the food produced in its river basins. The Hindu Kush Himalaya region also provides ecosystem services such as water, food, and energy that directly sustain the livelihoods of 240 million people in the mountain and hills of the Hindu Kush Himalaya. The Hindu Kush Himalaya mountains are a hotspot of climate change, where the temperature amplification by elevation dependent warming is evident. Even a 1.5 degrees Celsius global temperature rise by the year 2100 is too hot for the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, which will warm more rapidly at higher elevations to increase above 2 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. At the current emission trends, temperatures are expected to increase above 5 degrees Celsius by the year 2100 in that region. The two-thirds of the region's glaciers will melt by 2100 under the current emission trends, with one-third melting with an increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. This significant challenge are also compounded by other looming issues of the sustainability, including the overexploitation of natural resources, unplanned economic growth and growing inequality, and the current governance system. As a result, there are now greater risks and impacts on ecosystems, agricultural systems, weather patterns, and disease vectors that bring with them profound consequences for the mountain people and people downstream in the 8 countries. In the face of these clear challenges, there is an urgent need to build social ecological resilience both in the mountains and down. I'd like to talk another issue is the rapid increase in air pollution in recent decades, with far-reaching and hazardous consequences for environmental health and the health of poor people. In many places, both urban and rural pollutants have reached alarming levels, threatening the health of millions of people in the region, particularly women, children, the elderly, and the poor. It is also noted that people in the mountain and downstream communities in the region live in a multi hazard environment. As a result of climate change and other drivers, disaster events have increased in frequency and intensity. The region is especially prone to floods, avalanches, and landslides, but also droughts, sometimes resulting in cascading disasters with upstream downstream linkage and transboundary impacts. The speed and scale of more recent changes concurrently demand a speed and scale of disaster preparedness, risk reduction, and resilience building among the communities, especially in the context of river basins and transboundary landscapes. Next, I pass to Ms. Yap.
The numbers of disaster event, people killed, and economic loss recorded in the Himalayan region between 1980s and 2015 is shown in the top right figure, and in bottom right, the number recorded in the countries of the region. The Hindu Kush Himalayan accounted for 21% of the major disaster event recorded globally. All the countries in the region were included in the 20 Asian countries rated as mortality hotspot. Floods accounted for nearly half of the event recorded in the region, as floods are prominent across all countries. Next. Um, Riverine and flash flood are the most common hazards in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region and accounted for 17% of people killed and 52% of the damages. Unpredictable monsoon rainfall patterns and increased climate variability have led to severe and frequent flood disaster in the region, as shown in the top right table. And the spatial extent and impact of the flood disaster is shown in the bottom right figure. Accelerated glacial thinning, degraded permafrost, and additional retreat in response to rising global temperatures are expected to increase a glacial lake outburst flood event in the future. Next. With fragile geological formations, a seismically active mountain system, and intense precipitations, the Hindu Kush Himalayan region is a global hotspot for landslide. Particularly in inland countries as shown in the right figures. Influences like unsustainable development and excessive resources extraction, particularly deforestation and road building, have adversely influenced slope stability and aggravated the possibility of landslide. Global disaster database tend to closely underestimate landslide fatality as they are normally recorded under the primary trigger and not the hazard itself. Next. The major cause of earthquake in the Himalayan is subductions of the Indian plate underneath the Eurasian plate, which cause contractions and stress concentration. Plate motion model and GPS measurements indicate that the Indian-Eurasia convergence continue today at a rate of about 40 to 50 mm per year, while the rate of contractions across the Himalaya is estimated to be only 70.5 millimeter per year. The difference in this rate is absorbed by a combination of thrusting, cluster extension, and strike-slip motion within the Eurasian plates. Seismicity is considered high in this region based on the frequency and intensity of past earthquakes listed in the table. Next. The term cascading is used to describe the interconnected nature of the processes in which a primary event triggers a chain of subsequent hazard events as listed in the table. Earthquake can create landslide and dislodge large sections of glacier or ice wall and cause a glacier lake outburst flood. And a glacier lake outburst flood can erode the toes of hill slopes downstream, adding sediments to the river and raising the riverbed, which in turn can lead to blockage in the river downstream. The context of cascading hazard and thus cascading disaster is particularly relevant in a mountainous setting like the Hindu Kush Himalayan region, where primary and secondary hazards are closely interrelated. To address this issue, it is essential to have a multi-hazard early warning system. Next, I'm passing back to Mr. Saiful.
Thank you, Ms. Yap. I will continue the presentation with the effect of the climate change. There are 9 effects that have been identified. The first one is water-related hazard. Water-related hazard and risks are omnipresent in the Greater Himalayas and landslide, also debris flow and flash flood are projected to increase in frequency in the upland, with riverine and coastal flood likely increasing in the lowland. Number two, effect on hydropower. The building of the storage dam upstream is expected to significantly affect flood risk downstream, especially possible loss of life and livelihood in the much more densely populated plains in Nepal and Bihar, India. Effect number three is effect on livelihood. It will increase in average temperature and abrupt change in the precipitation regime are perceived to take place in the region by most people. They are also during winter, the people of the region are increasingly getting overwhelmed with liquid precipitation rather than solid precipitation that was traditionally received in the form of snow. Next, the reduced water availability in the region and people have already started to face scarcity of water. Then, productivity of the agricultural field is also reported to have decreased. Lastly, increased incident of pest infestation and animal attacks are also reported from the region. Effect number four is on public health. People are not able to take proper care of sanitation in their surrounding or personal hygiene, affecting the health condition of the population in rural areas. Particularly, the rural women are affected by several kinds of waterborne disease, and the children have been found to be worse affected by the unhygienic condition and lack of sanitation. Next slide, please. Effect number five is drought. The paucity of available instrumental climate record in cold and arid regions of the Western Himalaya, India, hampers our understanding of the long-term variability of regional drought, which seriously affect the agrarian economy of the region. Non-stationarity in such relationship appears to be the major riddle in the predictability of long-term drought much needed for the sustainable development of the ecologically sensitive region of the Himalaya. Effect number six is forest fire. Forest fire have increased at an alarming rate in recent years, with multiple consequences in Nepal's forest ecosystem and landscape. Effect number seven is about tornado. First tornado in Nepal on 31st March 2019 in the southeastern part of Nepal made large-scale damage of people and settlement within a few hours. Effect number eight is the glacial retreat. In 2018, glaciers representing climatically diverse terrain in the Himalaya were mapped and monitored. It includes glacier of Karakoram, Himachal, Zanskar, Uttarakhand, Nepal, and Sikkim region. 1,752 glaciers were observed having stable front in the snout position and area of ablation zone. Lastly, the effect on the climate change is about earthquake. On 25 April 2015, the Gorkha earthquake magnitude 7.8 struck Nepal, followed by 5 aftershocks. The earthquake killed 9,000 people and severely damaged at 550 by 200-kilometer region in Nepal and neighboring country. Some mountain villages were completely destroyed and the remote location, blocked road and landslide dam rivers prevented ground access to many areas. Next, I will pass to Miss Yap again to continue a presentation. Pass to you, Miss Yap.
Thank you, Mr. Saiful. The desired outcome for both the SDG and the Sendai framework are the product of complex and interconnected social and economic processes with overlap across the two agendas. DRR is essential to achieve this goal. Assessing risk without considering the effect of climate change is no longer an option in the multi-hazard mountainous environment, which are particularly sensitive to climate change. Mountain communities are more vulnerable as a result of their remoteness, poor accessibility, and lack of emergency communication. DRR and building resilience is vital to reduce future impact of melting mountain due to climate change on mountainous community livelihood in the Himalayan region. Sustainable mountain development requires a systematic and integrated risk management approach to avoid or reduce future losses and its transboundary impact. Risk-informed planning will help to create safer land use practice and hazard-proof infrastructure and housing. In addition, cross-border cooperation to share information and best practices is necessary for early warning system and other precautionary measures. Next, I'll pass to Ramzani.
Thank you, Ms. Yap. Some of the solutions for adapting this climate change effect by taking a case study of Nepal are the government of Nepal has formed the Climate Change Council or CCC in 2009, which is to provide high-level policy and strategic vision, as well as coordinate financial and technical support to climate change-related programs and projects. 6 thematic working groups or TWGs initially established during the development of the National Adaptation Program of Action, or in short NAPA, as part of the climate governance structure. The thematic working groups are led by a different ministry and cover different themes, which are agriculture and food security, forest and biodiversity, water resources and energy, climate-induced disaster, public health, and lastly, urban settlements and infrastructure working group. Next. Government of Nepal also established a national policy, namely Nepal's climate change policy back in 2011. Among of the core objective and target is to implementing national and local adaptation program and action to study of impact of climate change in mountains, hills, and lowland ecosystem and landscape, research into loss and damage associated with climate change impacts, agriculture sector enhancements by adopting climate-friendly technologies and reducing climate change impacts, sustainable management of forests, and lastly, institutional level capacity buildings. Next. In the context of non-government organization or NGO approach, a national NGO in Nepal, which called Local Initiative for Biodiversity, Research and Development, or in short, LIBERT, has been working with local communities to develop locally feasible adaptation measures with the participation of local knowledge, resources, and skills, as well as builds a local and national capacities to implement the policy. They also support a national and local government and non-government organization to design and implement climate change responsive policies, programs, and plans. Provide an appropriate support to local communities and strengthens networks and partnership to improve public awareness, information sharing, community participation, lobbying, and policy advocacy. On the other hand, they also generate internal and external support to document and disseminate the field realities of climate change and climate change-related knowledge and technologies generated to a wider stakeholders, which is communities, local government, national governments, policymakers, donors, scientists, and academicians. Next. The community also took a proactive action to adapt with this climate change. Most of the solutions are locally developed by using indigenous knowledge, local resource, and participatory methods are socially acceptable and viable in long run. In Sikkim, India, indigenous community are coping with erratic rainfall and unseasonal floods and landslides by using local ecological knowledge and traditional techniques like riverbank retaining walls, terracing, and stabilizing slopes with native plants and rocks. Nepal are making vast tract of land untended, ultimately leading to substantive yield reduction in several districts across the country, people have responded by migrating to nearby urban centers. Labor migration is a prominent way of diversifying livelihoods and securing a source of income that is not affected by difficult local conditions and shocks. Next slide, please. In terms of agriculture, they practice the community-based biodiversity management or CBM, which to assessing and identifying the threatened crop species as well as the crop and their varieties having climate stress, tolerating threats increased farm income. Apart from that, they also implement home garden diversification approach, which adaptive approach at household level to address and respond to impact like drought and floods. The various components and their efficient management of home garden, such as kitchen wastewater management, cultivation of neglected and underutilized crop species, integration of small farm animals and fish, cultivation of vegetables, integration of fruits and fodder, and market linkage have contributed to increase their adaptive capacity and make home garden resilient to climate stress. Next. For the water resources, the community manage the usage of water tanks resource from free-flowing natural springs for water storage and will be used during recurring dry seasons. In Pakistan, they also use a glaciers as well water supply through slope-side channels. To overcome water deficiency, local people practice artificial glacier grafting to create new glacier. Next, I will pass to Mrs. Fariha for the conclusion. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ramzani. As for conclusion, it is obvious that human is experiencing the significant impacts of climate change now. It is disrupting global economies and affecting lives, costing people, communities, and countries dearly today and even more tomorrow. Without action, the impacts will be worse than before. Climate change is a global challenge that does not respect national borders. Emissions anywhere affect people everywhere, affect the poorest and vulnerable people the most. To win this race, the required and identified solutions need to be coordinated at the international and local level, and it should have started now. Any further delays will inflict larger economic damage on future generations, both in rich and poor countries, and are likely to increase social conflict and violence, particularly in vulnerable countries that already suffer from such problems today. The Sustainable Development Goals has set out an ambitious 15 years plan of action. It has set wider development agenda for the world, which could bolster the United Nations effort to tackle climate change through a new climate agreement. There are many hopes resting on the development agenda for post-2015, including the need for low emission and climate resilient communities. These agendas are really need to be integrated into wider efforts in order to end poverty, hunger, and inequality over the course of the century. Last but not least, the implementation of the Paris Agreement in line with the Sendai framework seems very essential for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals in providing a roadmap for climate actions that will reduce emissions as well as building climate resilience. I think that's all from us. With that, we thank you.